Good morning, everyone. I'm Shyla Sharp with your Florida Senior Living Association. I'm here to present our presenter for this session, Brett Sharp, my other half. Brett is the co-founder and CEO of SWA Protection. Brett is a retired law enforcement professional with 26 years experience at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. He has diverse roles such as SWAT team member, detective, violent crimes task force sergeant, K-9 and mounted unit commander, field force commander, and Region 3 domestic security task force commander. Brett has been teaching active shooter training for over 25 years, so please join me in welcoming Brett Sharp.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. As she said, I'm Brett Sharp, otherwise known as her other half. She wouldn't say better half because that would be giving too much credit. So, as she stated, I was with Jacksonville Sheriff's Office for 26 years, and I held a lot of diverse roles there. They asked me to put some of my background here. I'm not going to read everything because it would really bore you, but I did everything from the SWAT team, many different tactical units. I was a defensive tactics instructor, firearms instructor. I did executive and dignitary protection for many years, and So the most important thing I'd like you to understand is I've been teaching active shooter training for over 26 years. Me and the co-founder, Joel Weeks, we started the company because we were being requested to do a lot of active shooter training. So we started teaching it, and we've been going all over the city of Jacksonville originally, and then we started throughout the state and moved to the southeast, and now we're starting to do other areas of the country. We also do executive protection. We're called upon to protect some of your CEOs, billionaires, millionaires throughout the country, and we do that as well. But our bread and butter is doing active shooter training, and we are very passionate about that. So let's talk about some of the active shooter incidents that have taken place throughout the United States. I was very surprised when I was asked to teach this class that there is the amount of active shooter training or active shooters that are taking place in this country at senior living facilities. There were a lot, and I guess it just doesn't catch national news attention like the school shootings and some of the other shootings do, but there are a lot that takes place. So just want to go over some of those with you. We had one in, and I'm not sure why this screen is not showing all the way to the top here, but anyway, in March of 2009, a lone gunman walked to the senior living facility in Carthage, North Carolina, and indiscriminately started shooting random residents and staff. In total, 11 people were shot, 8 died, including a nurse. Local police officers responded to the scene, and fortunately, they were able to take the shooter down and render the facility safe. Also, you have in May of 2017, a lone gunman walked into a skilled nursing facility in Kirksville, Ohio with a gun. The shooter shot and killed 2 nurses and shot and killed the local police chief who responded to the scene. The gunman then shot and killed himself. That typically happens in a lot of these incidents. Either the police take them out or they take out themselves, or sometimes people have to take them out. So unfortunately, the police chief was only on the job for about 3 weeks when he responded, and he encountered the suspect and he killed him. So it was pretty sad. I mean, obviously any death is sad, but this guy was trying to save their life and just got on the job and he's taken out. So then you got October 2021, a fire maintenance man walked into the senior living facility that he was fired from in Capitol Heights, Maryland. The shooter confronted 2 employees at the facility and shot and killed both of them. Police responded and took the suspect into custody after a brief standoff. And the way that typically happens is they'll barricade themselves. I think in this situation, he barricaded himself in one of the rooms. There were some negotiations taking place. SWAT team probably responded, and eventually they were able to take him into custody. In May of, I'm not sure why this is not showing all the way here. May of 2025, police were called to an assisted living facility in Chicago in reference to an armed man with a knife threatening residents at the facility. Police arrived. Arrived, and the suspect, the police responded in the suspect's room. Suspect attempted to attack officers with a knife and was shot and killed by police. Police later discovered that he had actually stabbed one of the residents at the facility. When they were going through, they realized one of the residents had died, and they ascertained that he was the one who actually did kill him. And then last but not least, in June of 2020, a resident at an assisted living facility in Wesley, Rhode Island, shot 3 people at the facility, killing one of them. The suspect then shot himself and took his own life. The suspect had several issues with the staff at the facility due to him being warned about breaking facility rules. The suspect left a suicide note in his room and canceled his cable 2 days earlier, telling the customer service rep that he wouldn't need it since he wouldn't be around much longer. And yeah, a lot of times, and can you call that number and see if they can come fix that? So they're not missing half of that. A lot of times in these situations, I would say 60 to 70%, there's usually warning signs that an active shooter or some type of violence has taken place. But a lot of people just don't communicate, unfortunately, and that's key, as we'll get into later here. You got to communicate these things either with your staff and your management have to communicate, and then you got to communicate with law enforcement when it's needed. A lot of people just don't want to get involved, or they think it's no big deal, but ultimately there are red flags and warning signs that are warning you this is going to take place. Yeah, I'm missing half this stuff. It's on here, it's just I think the way the camera's facing it's not working. Let me see if I can fix that real quick while she's waiting. We're just going to improvise a little bit here. All right. So, and like I said, when I was doing the research on this, I literally could have spent the whole 50 minutes just talking about active shooter incidents in senior living facilities, which really surprised me, like I said. I mean, I found a bunch of them. The ones I listed were just some of the highlights, but there was a lot of residents bringing in guns or knives and attacking another resident or staff member, then taking their own life, either with a weapon or a knife. So there's a lot of violent incidents occurring in senior living facilities, and I'm sure you all know that in your facilities. I'm sure you hear about it or see it on a day-to-day basis. You got the resident-on-resident violence, resident-on-staff violence, staff-on-resident violence, and violence such as batteries, elderly abuse, rape, murder, suicides. I guess just in the last, anyone here from Jacksonville? We had a case here in Jacksonville within the last couple of years where basically someone walked into a facility and tried to pose as a CNA or a nurse and had raped someone inside the facility. And then a couple of years later, they had the same thing at the same facility happen. So it's kind of interesting. That seems to happen sometimes. And when I was with the sheriff's office, I had worked, some of my officers had worked a lot of cases, stuff like that. So pretty sad, but it happens, and I'm sure you're aware of it. So you got to take actions to prevent those type of things. So we're going to discuss some of that today. So let's talk about the psychology and profile of an active shooter. So there really is no set profile of an active shooter. They come from all walks of life. Most, if not all, of these attacks are perpetrated by males. They range in age from the early teens to late 80s. They also come from every major ethnic group in the U.S. I'd say most are males. However, we've had a trend here recently, not necessarily in senior living, but we've had some women doing this. Some trans women. There's a big church in Houston y'all might have heard about that came in with an assault rifle and started shooting people, Joel Osteen's church. We also had a shooting in Nashville at a Christian school, same thing. A trans individual came in and was shooting students and staff at the school, and they were eventually taken out by police. So just to make the point, it's not just males, it's females as well, although males dominated, obviously. So most seem to have an average type Avenger-type motivation, committing the attack correctly or incorrectly, they have been wronged. They often become increasingly angry and begin to fixate on violence as a way to release that anger. They're seldom spontaneous, rather they're usually a result of planning and a long downward spiral. As I was stating before, there's usually some signs. 50% of them, they know the people inside the facility or inside the hospitals or whatever the case may be. There's some type of common knowledge with those people. So this is based on from the FBI. The behavioral analysis units identified the following risk factors. This is not an exhaustive list. However, it does cover a majority of risk factors based on current research available at this time. There's a history of violence. There's exposure to violence, substance abuse, dependency, mental illness. This is not in order, but I would say mental illness is obviously up near the top because most sane people don't come in and kill innocent people for no reason. However, all these things are factors. History of suicidal thoughts or tendencies. There's some type of stalking, harassing, or threatening behavior. There's usually a negative family dynamic or support system, isolation or instability, and once I stated before, others are usually concerned about this individual prior to this incident occurring. So research shows that approximately half the shooters have a connection, as I stated earlier, to the targeted location. That is, they were an employee, former employee, or had some type of current or previous connection to the location they attacked. In cases where there is a connection, that means there is a potential for intervention prior to the attack being carried out. We often hear or see people state that they're looking back, they could tell something was wrong or if this situation was building up. And that's probably one of the biggest things. People just aren't communicating these concerns, and that's very important. Your staff and you all have to stress that you have to communicate these things with each other, being aware of it, or if you have security at your facility, getting them involved, and then it gets to the point where you have to let law enforcement know. Don't be scared to do that. Location of attacks. 50% of them happen in businesses, and this is any type of business. This could be your facilities, it could be hospitals, it could be an office park. Unfortunately, I've worked several of these over my career in law enforcement. Outdoors, that's just over 23%. I'm sure all of you remember the big outdoor shooting that took place in Las Vegas where the guy was up in the hotel room and he was just literally mowing people down at the music festival, and they were like, hitting fish in a barrel, unfortunately. Schools, they make up just under 20%, and then other areas. All right. So ways to prevent an active shooter incident at a assisted living facility. Active shooter attacker training for your staff. This isn't in any order. However, if I was to put it in order, this would be number one. Having the active shooter attacker training is essential in mitigating your violence and deaths inside your facility. If no one's ever been through this before, and I know a lot of y'all probably have because it's become a bigger trend throughout the country, but having an actual company or sheriff's office or someone coming in and teaching it is vital to the safety of your employees because it establishes the right mindset. It establishes employees how to survive in case this happens and to save their lives as well as the lives of your residents. So if any of you are decision makers, making sure the right company comes in to do that is very important. Vetting them and having a good company come in is super important because you want someone that's going to come in not only, there's plenty of training you can do online. The federal government offers that, but that's just reading. Having someone come in and explain it to you and show them what to do is important. It's going to increase your survivability. Identifying security vulnerabilities at your facility and make corrections to those deficiencies. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this already, but if you have a company come in or sheriff's office or anyone else, having them walk around and identify. There's simple ways of just seeing where how to harden your security of your facility by identifying simple things like making sure you have one point of entrance or exit, making sure your doors are locked, making sure windows are closed and locked, making sure that, like if we would come in, our company come in and do a CPTED study, crime prevention through environmental design, simple things that you can do that help make your facility safer. Implementing strict access control measures, including strict visitor check-in policies. I think most companies are doing this. However, my wife is in the industry and she checks in on facilities on a regular basis and for meetings. And sometimes I tag along with her if I happen to be there, and sometimes I need to use the restroom. So I'll go inside to use the facilities, and it's amazing to me, certain places throughout the country where I'm never even challenged. I'm not stopped, and I walk around freely and pretty much can do anything I want to. So my security mindset, I'm like, well, let me see how far I can go, and I'll just walk around and just act like I own the place, but it's amazing how no one stops me. So having someone at that front door and having those policies in place, I think is key, because number one, someone that's looking for an easy target, they're looking for places like, they're looking if this is going to be hard to get into, if this is hard to, now don't get me wrong, someone comes in and they got the mindset and they're wanting to really take someone out, they can do it. But you don't want to make it easy on them, and you want to make it challenging for them. So having those strict access points and training your staff that's working that front desk, maybe they're showing an ID, they're asking who they're visiting, a sign-in log, and I'm sure most of your facilities are doing this, but it's surprising to me the amount that do not do this, and I see it a lot. Also, since I've been at the show today, this week, I've noticed there's some vendors that come out there and they have some things, some technologies that make it even more challenging and helpful. So that's something you might want to look into too if you have the resources. Have an evacuation and lockdown plan in place. I'm sure most of you are already doing this, but having that in place is very important, not only for an active shooter, but also in cases where are we at? We're in Florida, so we know one thing about hurricanes, tornadoes, a fire. So having those really good plans in place is very important to prevent an active shooter, knowing where to evacuate, making sure your staff understands all the exit points and all that good stuff will definitely help save lives. Vetting employee hires through thorough background checks. This is very important. Like I said, I believe most of you all are probably doing this. Making sure you're hiring the right employees, doing a basic background check. You obviously don't want to hire someone that has a history of violence, has robberies, batteries, domestic violence, an active domestic violence injunction, something like that. You don't necessarily want, or you don't want them as employees at your facility. Not only to prevent an active shooter, but also violence in the workplace. It just, and at the end of the day, if, God forbid, something like this happens at your facility, trust me, there's going to be some attorney, especially ones of you that are corporately owned with deeper pockets, they're going to be coming after you and getting some money and trying to go for a large lawsuit. So you want to make sure you're hiring the right employees. Communication between staff and members of management about the possible threats from former employees, active employees, threats from residents, families, and outside sources. Like I said earlier, having good communication and training your staff to communicate with each other as well as management, especially management, super important because like I said, 60, 70% of these incidents, they've already known that there's some issues, some red flags have popped up. So if you're communicating and you're made aware of it, management, you've got to realize at that point, if you happen to have security, you run that by them, but you also need to make sure you're getting local law enforcement involved. This will help prevent an active shooter, but also help prevent a lot of your workplace violence if they're involved. So you come up with a strategy, there's things law enforcement can do to help you, and that's what you're paying their salaries for. So make sure you get them involved, but have that communication piece with you and your staff. It's very important. Train staff to recognize early warning signs such as mental health issues, domestic violence issues, disgruntled visitors, employees, former employees. This kind of goes to the communication piece, but training your staff to understand these things is very important. When there's For instance, we've had several cases where there's an employee with an ex-boyfriend or current boyfriend. I didn't put one on here, but there was a case, I can't remember the city, where a former boyfriend kept wanting to come see the ex-girlfriend, and she said no. And he says, I want to see you. She wouldn't do it. So he showed up with a gun at the facility and basically almost had a active shooter scene. However, police responded, and he took off and ran and before they got a hold of him. But that could have been a really, really bad situation. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. Domestic violence and things like that, and former boyfriends, girlfriends. So just having that communication piece in place and making sure that your staff recognize those signs and understand when to tell your management about this, very, very important. Communicating threats to local law enforcement and on-site security. I think most companies do not have security, but there are a lot that do. Obviously, that's what you're paying them for. You want to make sure your security staff is aware of these issues when it's brought to their attention. And then make sure your security staff is then relaying that to law enforcement. And I think most of them do a good job with that, but I think the key thing here is also communicating with local law enforcement. That's what they're there for. They need to be aware of it. If it's something that you're seriously concerned about, there's been a threat, someone's threatening with a gun, so there's like I said, a domestic violence situation, a former employee, someone that's a resident, a family resident that's getting angry because you're enforcing the rules and they're threatening you. They need to be aware of it. There's things you can do. There's injunction for protections. In the state of Florida, you can do a trespass warning. That's very easy for them to do, and that gives the police and you power to do something if they show up on site. So things like that is super important, getting local law enforcement involved. Conduct annual active training to stay proficient and to train new employees due to constant turnover of employees. Once again, I've stressed the importance of active shooter training. It's very important, but doing this on an annual basis is important. As you all know, turnover in your industry is strong, very high, correct? My daughter, she's a nurse. She started her career in the senior living space, and it says every few months, she says she just doesn't have enough people working for her. They're either quitting, going doing something else. So having those employees trained and understanding the concepts of the active shooter training is very, very important, not only for, like I said, not only for the active shooter piece, but also for emergencies, fires, natural disasters, things like that. If you have the resources, install security cameras in a minimum at your entrances in the common areas. A lot of people don't have the resources for this, but it is helpful. It allows you to see who's coming inside your place in case there's a suspicious person. All of a sudden you're like, when it comes to communicating, someone said, I saw this person the other day, came in. This allows you to go back and review this, and then once you see that something suspicious or something's happened, it allows you also to contact law enforcement and they can do their investigation. It makes it easier on them if they know at least who they're looking for and what they're looking for. That way, in the case they need to put out a BOLO or run that facial recognition against some information they have on files. It helps them, it helps you. And once again, this is if you have the resources. I know sometimes resources are limited, but it's a useful thing if you can do it. Creating safe rooms where you can lock doors to prevent an active shooter or attacker from entering. So I'm not suggesting that you actually have these big bulletproof rooms, nothing that extreme, but just having rooms throughout your facility where they can lock the door on the inside. They can grab a couple of residents or grab someone inside, pull them in and lock it. I know sometimes that's impossible when doors go outward, but there's other things you can do, like when we teach some of the active shooter training, there's little devices you can literally buy from Amazon. There's basically a big door lock. Matter of fact, sometimes if my wife takes me to a sketchy area, I bring one of those where I can lock the door. It's basically a nice long pole. It comes underneath the door lock and it braces in the ground. It makes it impossible for someone to come inside that room unless they're just literally taking out the wall and the door lock frame and everything else. So it's helpful, and it's only like $30-40. So investing in some of that throughout your facilities, not every door, but in case something like that happens, it allows them to actually lock the door and keep them coming in. Obviously, if it's door locks, your staff needs to have a key in case your residents decide to lock themselves in. So something to think about. Once again, I can't see the bottom, but I'll read it anyway. ensuring your facilities has radios or a good intercom system. So I'm sure a lot of your facilities already have an intercom system, but you want to, especially in some of your larger communities, you want to be able to communicate. If, for instance, if someone comes into the back of your facility and they're armed with a knife, an axe, a gun, and they're doing something, and it's a large facility, you want to initiate that lockdown. By doing that, you got to have an intercom system or radios. I like both. You can get some really inexpensive portable radios that you can utilize, but you want to make sure people have it at different points throughout your facility to alert them when something like this is taking place. So, something to think about. If you have the resources, I've already mentioned this, hiring trained security guards is not a bad option. It's a good option. But if you're going to do this, you want to make sure that you are vetting your security company well. There's a lot of security companies out there, and there are some that are just not very good. So making sure, just like hiring employees, you want to make sure that company has highly trained personnel, as well as making sure if they are on site, you don't want your security guard looking at their phone all the time, sitting in a chair reading books. You want them active. You want them walking around. You want them patrolling. You want them doing their job. And that's up to management and staff to make sure they're doing that. They're meeting your expectations. So vetting that security company and hiring the right people is essential when you're using that amount of money for those resources to hire someone. Make sure you vet them correctly. Ensure your staff and security personnel are trained in de-escalation and active shooter attacker response. So the active shooter piece, we've talked about that, having the proper training, but also de-escalation. I believe that's very, very important. When I was in law enforcement, we taught to officers about the importance of being able to talk people down. We used to have a class called verbal judo, where basically you're talking someone down. When you have a violent resident or you have someone that's coming in your facility that's freaking out, the last thing you want to do is raise their level up here and make the situation worse. Learning how to talk to people, calm them down, and at least talking to them until someone else is calling 911 and getting the police there is very, very important. So having that training's important. Ensuring all staff have building layout sheets that reflect the emergency exits within your facility. I think this is very, very important, like I said, not only for active shooters, but also your emergency preparedness plans. I would have every one of your staff members make a copy and distribute it. When you have your annual training, biannual training, whatever it is you do, make sure they have it, especially if you new employees. They need to understand where those exit points are. They need to understand where your evacuation plan is, where you're going to go. When we're teaching classes, we're telling them, you're not always going out the front door. You may be going out the side door. If you have someone coming up front, coming in your facility with a gun, and that lockdown code is given, or that evacuation code is given, they need to understand, okay, we're not going out to the front door, we're running out the back, or we're running to the side, or we're going to the room. So, but if they're not familiar with their facilities properly, that could be a problem. So I would have them have that. I would also share that with your local law enforcement. Which goes to my next point. Inviting your local law enforcement agencies to walk through your facility, to understand the layout, and understand your evacuation and emergency response plans. I think it's key. You want to have your local law enforcement as partners. They enjoy doing this. Have them come to your facility, understand what it is, and give them your evacuation plan. A lot of times they'll actually give you pointers on how to improve that or some things you might change. So getting them involved, making them shareholders with you, I think that's very important. Also, something to think about. I know when I was with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, we used to have, we would reach out to communities and communities would reach out to us, business leaders, and they would have stop stations where you're basically, we'd give them a little placard to the front of their building, and they would know this is a Jacksonville Sheriff's Office stop station. You'll have police, deputies coming by, writing reports. You'll have a little room or a little office that they can go in, or a desk or a break room. They come in, they write the reports, they have a cup of coffee, they use the restroom, whatever. It's free security for you. And if people start seeing that police, well, number one, they see the police car, they're not going to come attack. They're not going to want to commit violence. They're going to bypass you and go somewhere else. But look, again, it's free. and it encourages that relationship with your local law enforcement communities to start stopping by. You start having relationships with them. It's good for you, and once again, it's free. If your facility has a no weapons policy, ensure that you enforce this, except obviously for your law enforcement and your security guards. When I was doing the research on presenting today, it was amazing to me. A lot of what would have been considered active shooters is residents that actually live there, killing them, shooting their wife or their loved one or another resident, and then killing themselves. So I'm sure most of y'all probably have a no weapons policy. But if you do have it, make sure you enforce it. Now, once again, at the end of the day, if I want to sneak a gun in there, it might be difficult, but if your personnel up front is trained to look for those things, like your front desk person, when we're teaching classes, we talk about looking at the person, looking at their total body. Do you see a bulge in their waist? Do you see a bulge on their leg? Do you see something that looks like a weapon? Having them trained to actually look for that, and once they start doing it on a regular basis, they'll be very proficient at it. So having them understand that, having them start doing that is going to help protect, just one more layer of protection for you. Maintain and continuously update your emergency contact list for residents and staff. I'm sure most of you already have this, but keeping that list updated is important, because if an emergency occurs, not just an active shooter, hurricane, tornado, fires, you're going to be able to make that emergency contact next to kin and let them know what's going on. Also, if there's a situation where people are missing, you want to be able to reach out. While this might have occurred maybe early in their day, some guy, one of your residents is sitting out front, his son comes by and picks him up in the rocking chair and takes him to lunch. You don't know that person's missing. He wasn't checked out properly. So this allows you to go down the list. You make those phone calls, you can find out where he's at. Also, it helps with law enforcement when they're looking for missing persons and possible suspects. So keep that list updated. Have emergency response triage bags at your facility to include tourniquets, quick clot, chest seals, and emergency bandages. So this is something I literally carry in my car. I should have, if I wasn't with my wife, I would have brought it in here and showed it to you. You can literally create a bag for under $200. But having those things in place, super, super important. We have saved in law enforcement, and we learned this from overseas in Afghanistan and some of the wars over there. Having just a tourniquet alone saves a lot of lives. Someone nicks their femoral artery, they will bleed out very quickly, especially some of your seniors in these facilities. So if you learn how to apply a tourniquet properly until fire rescue responds, you're going to save a life. But especially in an active shooter situation. And the quick clot, the way that works is there's an open wound, they put it in there, it starts creating a quick clot to the blood. So it saves lives and stops some of the bleeding until fire rescue gets there. It's a very inexpensive investment to save lives. Like, once again, we're all about mitigating the deaths and serious injuries. So having that on site is very important. Establishing a collection point for residents. This is important, but this is something you're going to do after the shooting stop, after everything's safe. You want to have a place that's already established within your facilities that you would evacuate and you bring them to safely, because trust me, when the news media gets a hold of this and puts it out, everyone, their brother, is going to be coming to your facility wanting to check on their loved ones, obviously. So having that safe point already established, very, very important, and it keeps, they're out of the way of law enforcement, they're out of the way of the fire rescue, they're able to do their jobs, and then your people are in a safe area. So having that established, I think, is a very, very good idea, not only, once again, for active shooters, but you're talking about your fires, your other emergencies. What to say and what not to say to law enforcement. So if you have an active shooter at your facility, and God forbid some of you have to get involved or some of your staff have to get involved and they have to take someone's life, and that does happen. If it's a life or death situation and you're literally fighting for your life, there's a chance that would happen. You want to limit what you say to law enforcement. I'm sure a lot of the agencies around the country, and I know throughout the state of Florida, have went to body-worn cameras. So everything they say, everything you say to them is being recorded as you're in this incident. So the reason you're doing this, not necessarily for law enforcement, although you want to limit that too, because if you're excited, trust me, I have been in a shootout early in my career, very, very young in my career. I had a situation where a guy had just gotten out of prison. He had shot his best friend in the face, and unfortunately he fled, told his then girlfriend, I just got out of prison, police are coming for me, and I'm not going back to prison. So he made a decision to try to kill me and my partner. We had to take action, and we had to kill him, unfortunately. But as a result, afterwards, back then, they would immediately interview us. They've changed this policy, thank goodness, but they interviewed us immediately afterwards, and we stayed up all night long. Well, what we learned is, in law enforcement, is, when something like this happens, the adrenaline's running, you talk way too much, and you say stuff, and because you're scared and you're excited. I mean, it's just not normal to have to take someone's life, and it's a very traumatic experience if you do that. So you don't want to say too much that night. You only want to give out the basic information. This is what happened. A guy came in, he's got a knife, he's got a gun, whatever. I did this to prevent him from doing it. If you took his life, you took him out, whatever. You're only giving that basic information, and that's it. You leave it at that. And to be honest with you, that's all they need to know. So if they need further statement, if they want you to come down to the station, that's when you say, I'm really shook up. I'd like to at least calm down and talk to my attorney, and have your attorney come down there with me if it gets to that situation. Like I said, I wouldn't be as more concerned about what the police are going to do, but after this whole thing's over with, trust me, there is going to be some attorney, because it happened to me. We were totally justified. There was still an attorney trying to sue us because I work for a large department, deep pockets. They were trying to sue them. We did nothing wrong. Same thing would happen to you. So I would highly suggest you limit the information. You only give the pertinent information out, and you leave it at that. If they need more information later, talk to your attorney and go down there and give your statement if you need to. It's just going to protect you, protect your company, especially some of your bigger agencies, because unfortunately there's just some unscrupulous attorneys that are looking for a payday, and even if it's completely justified. So just be aware of that. All right, questions and answers. Open the floor to you. Yes, ma'am.
It's not really a question, but I wanted to share a best practice type thing. This month for Oakdale and our service this month is also active shooters, and unfortunately it's sad that we have to have this kind of thing.
Yes.
We have an all-staff meeting that we do every month, 2:15, all the staff come to it. So I decided ahead of time to set up something. So I asked a family member to do it. I used this pineapple cup that's sitting on my desk all the time. Someone gave me a long time ago. Put it on the table. I sit in front of all the staff, and I had him run down the hallway, grab a cup, and run out in the middle of me talking. And then I had a list of questions, and I took a picture of him in the lobby before this all started.
Right.
And everybody said he had khaki shorts on, like the color of your pants.
Right.
He had denim shorts on.
Yep.
He had a bright blue, kind of like that color shirt. Everybody said he had a green shirt on. Nobody remembered he had a baseball cap. And it was really alarming and eye-opening to the staff who think they know all about their surroundings and they're paying attention and like if a resident's missing, what were they wearing last? And that really proved that they didn't know what this man was wearing. This is a gentleman that they know all the time. He comes all the time and visits
Right.
his mom. And I think the look on their faces, so I think it went really well and showed them that, you really do have to pay attention to what's going on around you.
Yeah, it's
Exercise.
right. Yeah, it's very interesting what you remember. That's why, I said limit what you say to law enforcement, because sometimes it takes a while for your brain to process that, because like I said, it's not normal unless you're some combat vet just came back from Afghanistan and been in the crap for several years. Your brain just doesn't, us normal people, we just don't remember things that way, because our brains function to protect us. So you're right, yeah. We've done the same thing when I was in the investigative division, detectives. Train your brain to remember certain things. Yeah, you don't remember things correctly in a traumatic incident like this. Anyone else have any questions or statements? Yes, ma'am.
If you ask the sheriff's office to come out and do the training with us, do they charge?
They don't typically. However, I was with the sheriff's office. A lot of sheriff's offices, some are very good at it, some are very not. Especially some of your smaller departments. Like, for instance, my department, we actually send our officers off to a school to learn how to do it. So, yes, most will actually do it, but if you're looking for quality training, really good training, I would suggest looking at a company, to maybe do that for you. But to answer your question, yes, most do, depending on the size of the agency. Some of your smaller agencies don't. Yeah, they probably have someone that will.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised they don't reach out to us. I mean, they're there all the time.
Right?
For various reasons.
Well,
Hang out in our parking lot.
unfortunately, like your senior living facilities, they're limited in resources as well, and they're putting people doing other things. Obviously, trying to fight crime, answering calls for service. Their resources are limited as well, unfortunately. You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions or statements? Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending. Once again, this wasn't, I stressed this to Gail when she asked me to speak. This isn't I wouldn't call this a training class. This is more of awareness and preparedness, but I encourage you to reach out and find some good training for your senior living facilities. I listed our information up there. If you'd like to contact us, we'd love to help you. But if not, good luck, and good to meet all y'all. Thank you. Oh, yeah, it's right here, I think. It's the next slide, yeah, there you go. Sorry. That's why I have a good moderator here to keep me in check here.
Do you go to South Florida communities to?
Yeah, we do. We go everywhere. We cover all of Florida, but we've also moved into the whole Southeast. It's honestly up to you. I mean, a lot of places usually want us to do it within an hour, hour and a half. Yeah, sorry. A lot of places want us to do it in an hour, hour and a half, but we can do it as long as you want. So it depends on you. We tailor our training for your individual communities. So we can go really in depth, and we'll do some actual scenarios and a bunch of other stuff, or we can, a lot of times, a lot of the corporations we deal with, we only have time for an hour and a half. So we're like, whatever you need. So yes, as long or as short as you want it, we can do it. We tailor it towards you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me.